All right, so welcome back. This lesson we are going to be taking a look at facial proportions. And in order to kind of help us out here, I'm going to use a little bit of a darker pencil than what I normally would if I were doing an actual drawing. And the reason for that is I simply just want you to be able to see the lines and the markings a little bit more clearly. Right, so remember when we are starting out a drawing, we're using typically a pencil that's a little bit harder, perhaps a B or an HB pencil, and then we would move into the softer pencils like the 5B, 6B, etc. in order to create the shadows. So today what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the idea of proportion. Okay, so proportion simply means that we have something the right size in relation to something else. Right, and that's all we are talking about. Okay. When it comes to portraiture, okay, and drawing the human figure, one thing that we have to be extremely mindful of is that many of the tutorials that you are going to see online or you're going to read about, they are based on the ideal proportions of a white person. Right? We do need to recognize that facial proportions vary from person to person, but also from race to race. So what we are providing is a guideline for how you should look at your subject. These are not hard and fast rules of exact measurements that you need to be following, okay? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna get started. And the first thing that we're gonna do is we need to think about the shape of the head, okay? So to do that, I always kind of think of shapes as being kind of round or kind of blockish or perhaps more of like an egg shape. Okay, so to start with, I start by drawing the cranium, which is the upper part of the head, and then start using a second circle to start defining the jawbone, right? And the jaw is the part, the lower part of our face that moves up and down as we're talking and we're eating, right? The cranium part, that's pretty stationary, right? We turn it and we can kind of manipulate it, but it's the jaw that does most of the movement in the head. Right, so from here, once I have these two kind of figured out, I'm going to start sketching in what I want the shape to be and fixing this overall shape up, right? And I'm using kind of sketchy lines at this point because these are really good for defining where things need to be. Once I have the shape figured out, I'm going to use my eraser and I'm going to again, erase the inside, right? And you have to remember that when you're drawing somebody, especially if you're drawing somebody from life or from a photo, it is essential that you are paying attention to the nuances of each individual person. Right? One thing that we do have in common, right, is that our face is essentially symmetrical. Okay, so if we have a line that kind of comes down the center of our face, right, what happens on one side is fairly closely replicated with what happens on the opposite. Okay? Once we have this vertical axis established, right, we can start moving into thinking about where the different facial features need to be placed. What I will often see is that eyeballs are located way up in the upper portions of the cranium area of the forehead. Right? And if you do a little bit of an experiment where you put one hand underneath your chin and then you put another hand right on the very, very top of your head, I'm hoping that you're feeling some hair there, perhaps, or right, it's kind of bony. And if you're feeling hair and then you slide your hands down towards your face, right, there's actually quite a bit of that part of the face that we see that is just covered with hair. So this needs to be in the back of our mind as we're thinking about the placement of our eyes. Generally speaking, right, we need to be thinking about approximately halfway. Right? The eyes are actually halfway from the top of from the top to the bottom of the head. Right? Some people might have them up a little higher, a little bit lower, right? But generally speaking, the next step is to establish where are the eyes in relationship to the entire head. Okay? From here, we can start to think about the size of the eyes, right? So we've thought about the placement, now we're thinking about size. With these, what we're going to be thinking about is how wide is the eyeball, right? And most cases, what I would do is I would actually kind of measure out and figure out how many eyeballs fit across the subject's face. In some cases, it's going to be 4. In some cases, it might be 5. In some cases, it might even be 6, or it could be even a fraction, right? It could be 4.5. So using that basic principle, I'm going to kind of block out how big I think the eyes should be, right? And fairly consistent, right? This space here should be close to the same space over here, right? The space in between, right? We often will say, right, especially from that white idealist perspective, is that the spacing between the eyeballs is the same as one eyeball, right? And that we want to measure out and make sure for our subject as well. Right? And then from the outside, right, I can see that there's a little bit of a difference on one side to the other. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of clean this up because I'm drawing a portrait from the front. So I want the spacing on the sides to be fairly consistent. Right? So once I have the spacing figured out, right, I'm going to just kind of block in what I want the eye to look like, keeping in mind from those previous videos that we have a tear duct. So I'm using some of that knowledge as I block this in as well. Right, and I'm going to block in the irises, then the pupils, right? This is just, again, a very, very rough sketch. Okay, so I'm going to sharpen up my pencil as I'm going here, just to make sure I keep getting some fairly crisp lines. Right, the next thing that I need to be thinking about is the length of the nose. Right, again, measuring out, we would measure from where the eye is, okay, and make a relationship to the bottom of the chin. Where does the bottom of the nose fall? Is it halfway? Is it 3/4? Is it 1/4? Okay, so again, we're figuring out length, and I'm going to draw a line in where I think the bottom of the nose is in reference to my subject. And again, the next thing is to think about, we've thought about length, how tall the nose is. Now we want to think about the width, right? And in some cases, the nose could be quite wide. In some cases, it's quite narrow. Right? Use the eyes as a reference to help you determine how wide the nose should be. So look for the outer edges of the nostrils. And if you were to draw a line straight up, does the line come to the edge of the iris? Does it come to the edge of the tear duct? Right? And that's a creative decision and an observation that you're going to need to make. So I'm going to establish the width, right? I can see that I'm a little off center from that main vertical line, which is fine. Right? And again, I'm going to now kind of come in and I'm going to start blocking in the shapes here, establish the tip of the nose. Right, and this is just a rough sketch at this point. And from here, I also need to be aware that the edge of the eye socket is connected as well. Okay, so I'm going to erase my width lines and establish the shadow here. There we go. Okay. The last sort of main facial feature that we have here is the mouth. Again, where is the mouth vertically located between the bottom of the nose and the bottom of the chin? Right? Again, we'll draw that horizontal placement, that vertical placement by creating a horizontal line. And again, figure out how wide the lip is. Look to your subject. Does the lip come to the tear duct? Does it come to the edge of the iris? Does it come to the pupil? Right, and use that as your guide. It looks like I need a little bit more chin, perhaps. All right, and remembering that the bottom lip is a little bit thicker. Okay, and once I have these features kind of in and placed, I'm going to start coming back into the outer contour, and I'm going to establish a better chin. so once we have the basic features in place, right, the next part is the ears. And again, where does the ear start, right? Look at the top of the ear. Is it aligned with the top of the eye, the center of the eye, or the bottom of the eye? And where does the ear come to? Does it come to, hopefully, right, you're saying, does it come down to the lips, or does it come down to the bottom of the nose? Generally speaking, most ears we find are kind of located between the eyes and the bottom of the nose with some variation. And I'm going to draw in the ears, just again, roughly to establish that basic sense of proportion in here. Okay. And next I need to think of the hairline. You know, males and females are going to have different hairlines. Where does is it a high line? Is it low? Right. If I'm going to kind of draw a male-ish kind of figure here, right? So I'm going to have the hairline about halfway, right? The hair is kind of pushed up across the front, right? And I need to add on a little bit of mass on the outside of the skull in order to accommodate, right, that the hair kind of sticks out. So we have hair down the sides. Get some more just darker value in behind here. Like so. Okay. The last thing that I want you to be thinking about is starting the neck. Okay, so often what I will see is that necks are coming out from kind of like in this area, right? And this is kind of creates that bobblehead appearance. The neck is actually quite wide, right? And if you feel across your neck, right, from kind of where your shoulders and you feel up, if you go kind of straight up the edges, it actually comes in from just under the ears. So we're gonna bring the neck down from fairly close to the ears here, establish, right, we have the clavicle, which is the bony part at the base of our neck. Okay. And lastly is the width of the shoulders. And this is something that's really important because a lot of people will tend to make these really narrow. If I have that line that comes down through the center, I'm going to use that as a rough guide. So looking at the width of the head, again, typically, right, we're looking at about 2 head widths for the shoulders, right? But you're going to want to measure this for your subject. So I'm going to line my pencil up across the width of the eyes, all right? And I'm going to bring this down, and this is going to give me the marking for the width of my shoulders. And then I can take this again and come out the other side, which is kind of off the paper. But this will allow me to make sure that the breadth of the shoulders is more accurate. Okay, so basic proportions, right? I've done my best to kind of steer away from the stereotypical white idealist rules. However, I am a white man, and that's sort of that's my own lived experience, so that's what I tend to draw, right? If I'm drawing, this is kind of from my head, but if I'm drawing myself, I am going to be looking at the mirror and looking very specifically at those relationships, not at the rules that are out there that we see in all of those other proportion videos. Okay, so remember, proportions are about making things the right size in relationship to everything else. It's not about following the prescriptive rules in many of these videos, because those proportions are often considered to be the white ideal proportions. Good luck. Have fun experimenting and playing, trying to get a sense of how to place these facial features together in relationship to each other. Best of luck, and I can't wait to see what you're able to put together. Have a great day. Bye.